Ready to
Never moves that fast.
Hello, everyone. I would like to call to order the Planning and Zoning Board meeting for the Village of Pinehurst, North Carolina, for our work session on October. I'll point out that we do have 5 board members. We're expecting a couple more to come in during the meeting, so we'll welcome them. But we do have 5, and however, we are not taking any sort of action tonight. I'll go ahead and remind everybody to please speak directly and clearly into your microphones as we are being audio recorded and videotaped. So let's go ahead and introduce ourselves, beginning on my right with Philip.
Philip Shoemaker.
Julia Latham.
Jack Farrell.
Thank you, everybody, and I'll point out that we have staff liaisons with us today: Alex Cameron, Darren Barrich, and Maria Carpenter. Welcome, everybody. So with that, we'll just turn it directly over, I guess, to Darren.
All right. Well, we are going to continue working on the form-based code for Village Place. And we haven't been able to meet for a couple weeks now, so I'm glad we've been able to get together tonight and work through some of this. I think we've made some good progress on what is really the meat of the form-based code, being the regulating plan. We did spend a lot of time at the last time we met going over the uses in the blocks. I think we had some good conversation on that. We can always circle back to all these things, but we're moving in the direction we want so we can adopt this at some point. So tonight, what I want to do is go over section 2 of the form-based code, which is site design, which is this document that you have. And this is really where the lot standards come into play. The regulating plan is actually housed in here, but we've been working on the regulating plan separately. So you'll see that in chapter 2. But this is really where those lot standards are contained. And that's really why I provide you with the illustrations here, because the illustrations kind of show what the lot standards are trying to achieve from a development pattern standpoint. So when you start to look at the overall aerial, the ground level detail, and just the detail plan, that kind of shows what the intent of the form-based code is trying to set. I think we also provide you with, what we did is we took table 9.2a of the table of dimensional requirements right from the PDO. We took out some of the zoning districts. What we did is we created the table of how, if we adopted the site design standards that are currently contained in here, this is kind of how it would look in our table 9.2. So you can see, it has front yard setback, it has minimum landscape area. So all those things are contained in this table, and we'll go over that lastly. But we're going to start with section 2 just to kind of start going over what the proposed standards are. Alex, you'll join me when I start to veer off. All right, Alex? He's not. And when I get too windy. All right, so section 2, site design. Any questions before we get going on this? All right, let's get into it. All right, site design. So this chapter is composed of an overview, the regulating plan in 2.2 as I discussed, the lot standards. You can see it, right, Sonia? You can see? Okay. The lot standards, corner and lot front elevation standards, and we have covered a little bit of that. So let's go to page 1 of the plan, which is the purpose. This is really, the way the form-based code is coming together, it's trying to promote a design framework that is kind of showed and outlaid on this detailed plan. You can see that the buildings are up closer to the street. It's a little more dense, and it's trying to replicate some of those elements that are found currently in the village center area. And again, the plan is illustrative, but it shows how things could come together in this area if, for instance, the public services facility is removed in this area and relocated. We put some roads into the area to allow this development pattern to occur. Now, this plan, this particular detail plan will need to be updated a little bit because we made some changes in Village Place along Magnolia. With the development pattern. This is showing a commercial development pattern along Magnolia, and what ended up changing is no change in this particular area of Magnolia. So we're working on those changes as well. So again, the lot standards that you start to see are going to start to show, are starting to bring this together. Any questions on this page? All right, so we'll go to the next page. So this is a lot standard. So as we start to develop, these standards, there are different types of blocks. There's corner blocks, and there's mid type blocks. So if you go down to lot types over here on the left side, it states that these are the type of lots. One is a mixed use commercial retail. So that's retail, office, hotel, multiple family, and that's the majority. That's the majority of the lots that are really located in the Village Place area at this time. We have the live-work units. Those are rear-loaded. Single-family attached rear-loaded. Single-family detached cottage rear-loaded. Single-family manor rear-loaded. And single-family detached villa front-loaded. And when we say rear and front-loaded, rear-loaded means we're trying to create a pattern where you're accessing the parking lot, the main parking lot, from behind, from the rear through an alley, through a secondary street access, or at the very least, if we have two buildings coming together, that they have shared access from a frontage area. So we're trying to get away from having the individual parking lots and individual driveway accesses off the main thoroughfare coming through those areas. Was anything else important on this one to point out? Just looking at my notes. No, nothing really on that one. So,
Are you looking at general provisions?
yes, I am.
Okay.
I'm not sure how, I don't have my glasses on, so I can't see.
Are you open to comments now or later?
It's what? Is it blurry? I don't know why it's blurry. It's a PDF, so. All right. Yes, I want comments. The entire time I want comments.
On the general provisions, if that's what we're discussing.
Yes, let's start with this page.
Two things strike me. One is it talks about driveways equal or greater to 18 feet. Mm-hmm. And I think I brought this up a couple times before, is that 18 feet doesn't seem sufficient any longer considering the length of vehicles that are parked in driveways. You don't have to go around to too many different developments and see where they have even 20-foot driveways, and they're barely adequate for the vehicles that are parked in these days. I just mentioned that. I think that's something to keep in mind, whether 18 feet's the right number or it ought to be 20 feet at a minimum.
And you're right, we have that discussion, especially with respect to, the trucks,
Yeah.
long, big trucks and SUVs.
Put it in the to be discussed column, I think.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and I really like the idea of alleyways in order to access not only residences, but more importantly, alleyways for delivery of
Loading?
material for commercial ventures. I mean, we see this in our current center now. You get 18-wheel trucks parked in the middle of the road delivering whatever they deliver to either the restaurants or shops. We just can't be having that in this core area again. We'll just tie the whole thing up in knots.
Yes.
So we ought to really think seriously about delivery of deliveries to commercial ventures, restaurants, and so forth, and whether alleyways can be built into the plan. That's just a comment that I think we really need to keep. Pardon me? Garbage pickup also.
Garbage
That's a
pickup
good
as well.
point.
Yeah,
Excellent.
loading zones and maybe what's the current requirements on loading for commercial? Do we have a specific loading zone requirement on the building that's at the back, or we don't actually have one? Okay.
Well, even more than commercial, everyone buys online, at least. I don't know how long in the future that's going to last, I don't know. But there's one heck of a lot of UPS trucks and FedEx trucks and so forth.
Yes.
In just even in residential areas, so consider that.
Question on that
Yes.
topic as well, just from my own context. So if it's 18 foot is the driveway and it is two buildings that come together and that is making some sort of an alleyway between the two buildings,
Mm-hmm.
how close then would the buildings be together?
Well, the buildings are going to be,
Maybe
depending on the type of the building and the setback that's required. So, you know, some of the commercial mid-block lots have a 0-foot setback. So you'd have to bring it off the property line in order to squeeze a shared driveway through there.
So
So,
that's kind of my point. So if we ended up with some sort of a load from the rear situation, two buildings being built close together,
it
and,
could be built,
you know, then
they could have a common wall.
18-foot could be pretty difficult
Mm-hmm.
at that point. Okay.
Well, 18-foot, what you're gonna probably do, if it was a shared driveway, and that's a good point, a shared driveway should be at least 24 feet in width, because you want traffic to be able to come in and come out. I think our loading zone, or our emergency access requirements are a minimum, are 20. So 20 to 24, for shared driveways, we should have 20 to 24-foot widths.
Yeah, if
That's
these
a
are
good
plans
catch.
for the future, I mean, who knows what the future is going to hold, but if the future's anything like the present as far as delivery goes and so forth, then I think we ought to really seriously consider that aspect.
And that's what we're trying to set up with this. I think we're trying to promote that with this.
See that with the alleyways, yeah.
Yeah, we just can't, the problem is I don't think you can keep UPS or FedEx or anybody from stopping where they want to. It seems,
Well,
I'm not
no.
sure, I'm not sure if you can,
shopping zone.
as I've seen them in the middle of Linden a few times. All right, and I think where the 18 comes from is our standard space, our standard parking space size is 9 by 18. Now that is, albeit that's an old standard, that standard's been around for a number of years, and maybe that should be lengthened out. So I think that's based on the standard space. So that doesn't mean that we can't add another couple feet to it, so we don't
Right.
potentially
Yeah,
have a
that's the
problem.
standard stall
Yes,
size.
Correct.
I put it, if I can use the word stall. But 20 feet would be at a minimum, in my opinion, these days. For a parking area, not necessarily for a parking lot,
Yeah.
but for a parking area
Well, the-
next to a building.
Where they're not clearly designated by striping and curb
Right.
wheel stops. That
Right.
helps organize it.
well, the other issue is the hangover. So you're gonna have a wheel stop or a curb, and where that wheel stop is that at 18 feet, or does that include the hangover?
I think, I don't think that is I think the 18 feet is basically the entire stall length. That doesn't
Right.
necessarily get measured from that wheel stop. So the wheel stop just helps that,
Okay.
or
So-
curbing helps that hangover.
And where we start to run into those problems sometimes is if there's a sidewalk there and they're overhanging the sidewalk or the wheel stop. So I think that maybe that is something we need to just revisit a little bit.
Yeah, just look at the village center as it is now. I mean, there's a lot of trucks, their back ends along with the hitches are sticking way out in the road, and people have to drive into the opposite lane in order to avoid them, so.
I get it. Yep, and alleys would help. All right. Anything else on this particular page? Again, just jump in as we're going through this. This is supposed to be freewheeling, so. All right, we'll go to the next page, which is the regulating plan. Is it? Josh, is there a reason why I can't seem to get it clearer than that? No, I have my hard copy. I'm just worried about,
Next to Philip.
no, I can see it. I'm just worried about people at home and people in the audience. Oh, yeah. Sorry. It shows up really good on here. So you know. All right, so this is the regulating plan. We've spent a lot of time on this regulating plan. What I haven't adjusted on the regulating plan yet officially, I have it on my notes, is in block M that we have here. We currently show just mixed use. We added number 2, which is the office building in this area. So we did add that area, that type of building to that to match up with the idea that we wanted to promote this area more for office style use in this area along Rattlesnake. And the other significant note that I had on this was to revisit and potentially, and I have notes that remove the active frontage requirement here on Magnolia and McIntyre in these 2 stretches. It doesn't mean you can't have active frontage, it just removes the requirement that you have active frontage. So that was what we had talked about. So those two are still out there. Any other questions on this particular page? We did spend a good amount of time on here, so I'm happy with where this is headed. Okay. Next page, excuse me. And this is now where we start to get into the actual lot, the lot standards. So there's a lot of writing on here, which I've boiled down at some point to this paper here, this table. But this kind of shows, this illustrates what some of these standards look like in the plan view format. So this setup is considered to be, it's a mixed use, commercial, and I get rear loaded lots. Again, we're trying to stay away from front loaded, but this shows how it sets up for a rear loaded lot. The minimum lot width that we're showing right now is 24 feet for a mid-block lot, and 34 minimum for a corner lot. So you can see that on the two side companion illustrations. The minimum lot depth, and again, these are minimums. The minimum lot depth is 60 feet. Building height is going to be the regulating plan where we limit you from 1 to 3 or 2 to 3, depending on where you are in the regulating plan. Yes, that is correct. Building width, this is where we have minimum building width set, and this is 24 feet. And that's a new standard, isn't it, Alex? We don't really have a minimum building width requirement right now, right? Okay. So that is a new standard for us. So that would be something that would be added. Building depth is going to vary a little bit. There's no minimum on that one. And then here's where we start to really get into that form section, which is in the primary setback areas here. Primary building setbacks. Front yard setback is 10 feet. And that's a build to line. That means if you want to build something, you have to be at 10 feet. And there's a companion requirement in that regard that says a minimum of 75% of the principal structure's front elevation facade shall be placed on the build to line 10 feet off the front line. That means you can't have, we want more building on the street versus parking lot versus some of the other things. So that is at 75%. I think we go down to 45% with some of the housing units. Side yard setback's going to vary because if you're a mid-block or corner lot, there might be some different requirements. So you want to look at the designs on the illustrations. So if you take the mixed-use commercial rear-loaded mid-block lot in the middle, you can see the minimum 24-foot width. You see the build-to line. You see the minimum depth. You see where the parking is proposed to be required. Jack, we should probably take a look at the 15, 18-foot section to back that away a little bit. Same thing on the right-hand drawing. And you can see you can have a common wall line for a 0-foot setback. So you could literally connect buildings with this scenario.
So the mixed-use commercial building, which could be a office or a restaurant or retail also, right?
Yes.
So its front facade is 10 feet from the parcel line, is that correct?
From the property line, correct.
That's 10 feet from the right-of-way then, I guess.
It's 10 feet. It's 10 feet from the edge of the right, which would be the edge of the right-of-way line, not from the edge of the sidewalk or paving line. So the right-of-way line, depending on where the edge of it is.
Right-of-way, we haven't gotten to street standards
No.
yet, obviously.
Correct.
Because that will,
Correct.
to a great extent,
Correct.
lay this out a little bit better, tell you the
Right.
truth. So the front of the building, a restaurant, a retail store and so forth, it's 10 feet back from the parcel edge, and they're responsible for building the sidewalk or whatever in that area?
Correct. Right now, yes, the minimum site requirements say that you have to install a sidewalk in the PDO. And if you look down, I mean, we just had a recent development along Rattlesnake. We made them install the pavers on just that one block. It looks kind of isolated, but it's a very nice looking paver set of sidewalks. But as people come in and redo their developments or do development, Yes, we make them install the sidewalks.
So it's not the village's responsibility to build the sidewalk against these buildings as it,
No, it's
but we
not.
do build sidewalks in our right-of-ways though, right?
We do.
I don't know, I guess I'm kind of mixed up here a little bit.
The difference is if you're developing, if you're creating lots, you're subdividing, which would have to take place in some of this, or if there's a vacant lot, or in the instance that Darren mentioned now, you have to come and get some sort of permit or approval, site plan approval, then it invokes the requirements in the development ordinance, which then are to install the sidewalk.
But for this core area, I mean, in theory, the village is going to lay this out as we'd like to see it developed, right? And there obviously, we have a substantial parcel that we own. So we can lay that out, the parcel that we own, assuming that, the public services moves out and so forth, and Moore County, we're able to get the Moore County parcels. So we have all those parcels. Would we lay out the streets and the sidewalks?
Well, we would have the design.
We would design them. We could, yes, if,
Maybe I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah, that'd be
No,
part of
what-
that negotiation and whatever.
should we
that
choose to,
construction-
we could install the roads, we could install the sidewalks. Or,
I'm
Yeah.
mentioning that is because then the 10-foot setback, is it 10 foot from the sidewalk that we've already built? Maybe I'm just speculating here.
well, right now it's going to be, the sidewalk should be the edge of, the sidewalk should be on the edge of the right of way, should be on the edge of the parcel line. So the building should go 10 feet from the edge, from the outside edge of that sidewalk line. That's where it should be.
Okay, so it would be potentially 20 feet or 15 feet from the curb.
Correct, there, because
Usually a 5-foot sidewalk.
because
and
you'll have a
10-foot.
terrace.
Okay.
You'll have a terrace in there. We haven't got to the street standards. You are correct.
I just wanted.
No, you're right.
I think this will all come together in the end, but it's a little confusing.
Yep.
Right now.
No, there will be a distant, there's a terrace requirement, or a minimum terrace requirement between the sidewalk and the curb.
Okay.
And that'll come out in the next section when we cover that.
Don't
I
mean
got a
to-
question concerning the 75% of the building to the build-to line. Is that the linear length of the building, or is that the mass of the building?
That's the linear length of the building. So 75% of that building has to be against that 10-foot line. And that other 25% would allow you to do things like outside seating, things like that.
You're going to have some standards definitions to outside seating and what qualifies as that.
Yep. There'll be hardscaping as part of the landscaping section. There is also the ability to put, and we haven't got to that section yet, and Jack, he's right, because you're not seeing it come together, but you would be able to have some types of hardscaping or seating between the sidewalk and the front of the building as currently proposed.
I have a question about that zero side setback. So you can build right.
Correct.
Now, if I build my building and I say, no, I really don't want to be flush up against somebody. I want my side of the building to have windows and light coming in. And so I stay 15 feet, 10 feet back from my property division line. Is there the possibility that we could end up with some kind of crazy, there are 2 feet between this building and 7 feet between this one and 1 foot between this one? Is there any way, do we want to standardize that in the event that someone chooses not to build to the property line?
This would be for mid-block buildings.
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, we do have some provisions in there for promoting passageways between buildings from the parking lots to the sidewalk, but you raise a good point. You could potentially set up a system where you're having 2 feet, 3 feet between the buildings and. No. What I've seen before, and we might actually have that in the VMU or VC, you can have 0 foot, or you have to be at least 5 foot. So you
A
can
min
create-
and a max.
So you can create, yeah. No,
I think that's what you'd want, so you wouldn't have like strange little 2-foot alleyways. I don't know why anyone would create that, but it would be better just to preclude the possibility of it being created if we're architecting this.
no, that's an excellent point. Yeah, that is a very good point, and I think we need to build that into there, because it's not currently built into it. It might be built into the existing VC. We say 0-foot men. No, we don't even have that. So, yeah, that's something that we should be thinking about doing. That's a good catch. See, that's why we have these conversations. All right. What else on this sheet has piqued your interest? We have accessory building setbacks, and so the accessory building setbacks, which are right here. Accessory building setbacks, front setback is 5 feet from the rear of the primary structure, shall be located directly behind the principal structure. And that's interesting. We don't currently have that requirement, but what we don't want is some type of accessory shed or something sitting out. So my building's 75% out there, and I could potentially have a shed over here in that view shed off the street. What this is saying, it has to be behind the building somewhere. It can't be isolated off the building anywhere else.
Will you make an allowance for people who have their entire rear as parking? A change there if they cannot put an accessory building directly behind? If it comes up,
Yeah.
just something to think about.
Yeah,
Maybe you should have the accessory building attached to the building so it doesn't look like a little hut there. That would make more sense. It would be more aesthetic.
you know, and we've had that discussion as well. I can't even think of too many places that actually have accessory building. I can't think of anywhere in town where there's any accessory building sitting behind a building. I mean, I'm sure there's something out there somewhere. I just can't think of anything right now. I'm thinking over by in the older parts by, McIntyre and Rattlesnake there, where theoretically you would have one. I just can't think of anything right now.
We just have to be careful or cognizant of like patios, other hardscape areas, so they're not defined as accessory structures maybe, so that there's allowances for them for those seating areas and all.
Yes. Okay. All right, anything else? This is a good conversation. All right, we will move to the next page. And this is really, this mixed commercial rear loaded lots, this is going to be the primary, these are going to be the primary uses or the primary lot types in Village Place. So we want to make sure that we get this right and we get the requirement right. We want everything to be right, but this one, so as you're looking at this, as you're talking about it, as you're thinking about it, email me so I know if you have any other additional concerns with this, because this is pretty important. All right. Live, work, rear-loaded lots. And this is we've had this discussion on these lots, and they're, this is a mixed-use building type, and you can see the mixed-use building type here on the lower right. So this is kind of what it'll look like. It's a live, work this is kind of like a townhouse unit, so it's a separate lot. But these have common lot lines and common wall lines within the way a typical live-work unit would be set up. And you'd be setting up those generally in banks of at least 3. So there's an individual separate unit that each one of these live-work units would constitute.
And why is this really different from the previous building type, commercial?
Because it's its own lot type. I see where you're going, because the other mixed, yeah.
You know what I'm going to ask next, which
No, I
is, it says the second floor shall be residential. I mean, how do you enforce that?
That we can enforce. Because it's going to be a building type, and they're going to come in with the type of use on the second floor. So they're going to, if we say it's got to be residential, it's going to have to be residential, because they're theoretically going to come to us with a building permit to get this use, and they're going to show first floor commercial, second floor residential, and we're going to have to define it. We got to make sure that we define the live-work unit as the second floor is residential.
Floor plans.
Pardon me?
Yeah, floor plans as well.
Floor plans, yeah. So it's enforceable.
I guess so. I'd hate to later on have to go into a building and validate that someone's actually living there versus, using it as a professional office building.
Preaching to the choir.
Pardon me?
Preaching to the choir.
Okay.
So keep going, so keep going. No, it's a concern, but it's a development type that I haven't talked to other communities yet who have done this, but this is not an uncommon development pattern. Some people call them live-work, others call them work-live. It's really what we're promoting is really work-live units.
I
So
mean,
work
we're
on
not
the bottom.
demanding that the person that's living on the second floor, third floor, be actually working on the first floor, are we?
No.
I mean, that's the implication, is that the friendly store owner,
That's what we-
who lives above
Yes.
the
So,
store. I'm not sure there's too much of that anymore.
I have a question, like on Pennsylvania now, there are those, as you head up the hill towards Broad Street as you're going towards Broad on the left side, there are some brownstones built
Yes,
there.
they're beautiful.
That have businesses below
Yeah.
and apartments above. Yeah, on Pennsylvania. Now, those units above are condo.
They are.
So what form of ownership is this? Is this somebody owns the building and they're renting a store and they're renting an apartment? Or is this a condo above a rental business? I don't know that it
That's not the-
matters. I'm just trying to figure out how.
That's not the intent. You're talking about a mixed-use building?
Am I?
You really are talking about a mixed-use building. The intent is it's a form of ownership, is that the person would be living there and working there. That's the intent of a live-work unit. And maybe I have to do a little bit more research on how effective those are as a development pattern.
Because it seems to me you're going to really limit who's going to come in there if there's some requirement that I have to live in the building. If I'm going to have a bike shop, I have to sell my house so I can live above it. It makes sense that I could have my bike shop and then maybe rent out that apartment. But you're talking it would be under one ownership and an apartment rather than a condo.
Point out that I took a look here, in every one of the blocks that we have live work as an option, we also have retail as an option. So my understanding of that, and tell me if I'm wrong, kind of to your point there, is then at the development stage, they would have the opportunity to make it a full retail, right?
Well, yeah, we have every single one you're right, every single one has not just retail, it has mixed use.
Mixed use.
Yeah,
So it does have
okay.
mixed
So
use.
at the development
Okay.
Going
stage,
back to-
The
that
developer
person-
can make a decision, do I want to hold on to this property and rent it out, or would I rather create a condo here and sell this and be done?
or just
Going-
complete retail.
Yeah.
Which goes back to our question of why do we have live-work when everything can be mixed use, but
It just seems like it's a subset of the commercial rear-loaded lots with the only difference is the definition has, it's kind of a single unit. Other than that, it appears to be very much the same as the commercial.
So our definition of live-work says with a common tenant in both spaces.
Well, and I will tell you what this document says right now. It says the upper floors shall be residential. Unlike a mixed-use building, a live-work is a single unit owned and occupied by the same persons.
Yeah, that seems like, I mean, I get it, but it seems like a hard sell if you're trying to create a bunch of these. But, as Jeremy says, we have commercial as an option instead. But if our goal is to create, I don't know, if it is a goal to create diversified housing stock, this is such a specific,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to want to open my bicycle shop in the village if I've got to sell my house and live over it.
It's not mandated, remember, so
Right.
it's not a mandated land form, so.
Right.
You have the mixed-use option, so you can always do the mixed-use option.
Sure.
So that's always out there. So I think the idea is when you're allowing for this, is to allow for somebody, should they
Okay.
choose to want to do that.
Okay, it's just
But you're
a-
right, down the road, they might want to go, this is not working. I want to change the zoning because I don't want to live here anymore.
Well, sure. Or I'm going to try to sell it, and I can't find anyone to sell it to who will buy it under this.
Yes, That's all good points. Thank you for raising them now.
Well, if I recall correctly, and I could be wrong here, that when we discussed this initially, we had some sort of a subset of this conversation, and we made the decision to pare it down to every location that we had a mixed-use
Yeah.
destination.
We did.
Something to that.
We did.
Okay, so
You're
that's why
correct.
we got them where they're the same. And is it redundant? Is it, I mean, I think. So-
Well, it's more specific in it that it says occupied by the same person, which is a lot different than the mixed-use thing, which doesn't require that. And I think I got to do a little bit more
I think we're
research on
buying
this.
ourselves an administrative pain in the rear later, trying to make sure that, are you selling it to somebody who's going to use it this way? And then investigating, did you sublet the upstairs, or are you actually, I mean,
That just adds to what we're doing right now. You're fine.
okay.
I'd like to also point out that possibly in development, the flexibility is there, but would it create any sort of inconsistencies, on a given lot or a certain development? Are we giving too much flexibility there and not enough definition?
Well, I'm actually thinking now, as we talk through some of these questions, that the market's going to sort itself out, because all the questions you raise are, why would I want to do something like this? Unless I was trying to do something where I was creating some, I have to do a little bit more research on this, but these are good points. So let's circle away from whether we want the live work, all right?
Come back to it.
Let's come back to that.
Okay.
Now let's look at the lot standards. Now you can see that the live work unit itself is similar to a townhouse. So the lot itself is, whether it be a corner lot or a mid block, is similar to the townhouse style lots. It's just townhouse with commercial on the bottom. So, or residential and retail on the bottom. So the standards for live work units are as follows. The lot width is a minimum of 24 feet. For mid block, it's 34 feet. The depth, 60 foot. Height, again, is a regulating plan. That's going to be 2 stories. Building width minimum, I'm just going to make a note. This should be a minimum of 2 stories. Well, it's got to be at least a minimum of 2 stories, because you're not going to put the residential in the back. So I'm just making a note that needs to adjust to 2 stories. See a regulating plan, but 2 stories minimum. Some of the images that you're seeing here in was it Beaufort?
These specifications are identical to the mixed-use commercial rear-loaded lots. Is that correct?
They're actually, some of them are the lot itself, the lot standards itself are the same as a single-family attached. So if you go on the next page, the width,
Oh, okay.
that kind of stuff, the width is the same, I believe, right? No, you're right. They look pretty similar. Yeah, they're pretty similar. All right, let's keep going. So the building width, minimum 24 feet. The building depth, here's where it varies a little bit. The minimum building depth we're showing is 34 feet. The primary setbacks are, the front setback would be proposed at 10 feet. Side setback would be, see diagrams to the right, because they have different ones for corner lot. And then the rear setback would be a minimum of 15 feet, 18 if parking on lot to rear. We've already talked about, should that be 20 or greater. The side yard setback, it should be, well, they should all be connected, until you get to a corner and to another, well, let me look at that. He raises the same question that Julia raised before with the minimum setbacks.
Sorry. Does it say minimum, or it just says see diagram, and then the diagram says 0? So it's not giving you the option here.
Well, it's got on the corner lot, it's got 10 feet, right? It's got 10 feet on the corner lot. It's got a build to line, so it's got 2 build to lines, but it doesn't have a build to line on the side yard, and I'm not seeing a dimension on the side yard. So that's something we have to look into here, because we also do say a minimum of 75% of the primary structures full building length shall be placed on the build to line 10 feet off. This isn't, the way I'm envisioning these is they're connected townhouse units. So it shouldn't allow that type of variation. So it should be, you should be sitting at 100% of that, 100% of the building width should be at the setback line.
And would they have to, it looks like it would have to go a full block to a corner.
Yes.
that you wouldn't have the option of stopping mid-block.
Well, unless it was another property line. So I have one development over here.
Uh-huh.
That's 4, 5, 6.
Oh, I see it.
Then I'm going to have
I
another
see it.
development, separate development.
got it.
So
Yep, yep.
those separate parcels. But that, this requires a little bit more work.
You have an example of that in the village on Marketplace.
Marketplace, yes. But you can see the precedent images on the lower right here. That is what the intent of what is, what the live-work unit is itself. Is it's showing those buildings are built right up to the property line or within 10 feet. They're built up to the side property line. There's no gap in between them. And that's what we're trying to achieve. And what's not, having a setback doesn't coincide with that. So we need to spend a little bit more time working on the side yard setback, potentially. I'm gonna have to pull some other standards to see how other places treat these. So that's a research project for planners. That's these two. All right. So, and on these, we're talking about parking should be provided on lot, off street, detached, attached, or integral garage on a parking pad located to the rear of the primary structure. Again, to Jack's point, it's treating it like a commercial lot.
And alleys are required essentially.
Correct. Especially on townhouses, you really want that. For a townhouse style development, you do want that.
Well, I like the idea of alleys. I mean, it's very consistent with the plan of Pinehurst going back to day one.
Exactly.
And if we could just revive that again, it'd be nice.
Exactly. All right, other than what's been raised, which has been a lot on this particular page, which is all researchable, anything else, any other comments on this? All right, now we're going to get into the residential lots. And you can see there's specific different types of residential lots that we're proposing to be able to be created within the area. Not that we're going to mandate them, but that they can be created. And the first one is going to be similar to what we just seen with the kind of a townhouse, which is a single family attached rear loaded lot. And a single family attached lot has a single unit, residential building, a townhouse, that shares one or two sides with adjacent units. Rear loaded refers to the positioning of the garage or parking pad and its access from the rear alley or shared access driveway. Single family detached development shall consist of a minimum of 3 units, because if it's 2 units, it's more like a duplex, each located on a separate tract of land. So in concept, do you get what the concept is? We do have townhouse developments in the community. That's not that they're not uncommon, but we do have a number of them in the community. I think La Forêt was our most recent one that we did over on Foxfire and Linden out there. So those are all townhouse lots out there. And what's the other one on Murdotsville? Royal Oak, that's another set of townhouses. And those, I think those are all sold out now pretty much. Those are selling pretty quick.
Knoxville, the Royal Oak, yeah.
So the standards for SFA lots, single family attached lots, are as follows. Lot width, and I'm going down the left side here. Lot width is 22 feet, mid-block 37 for a corner lot. Lot depth is 75 feet. I think we did adjust that from the commercial. Building height, again, see regulating plan, but there should be a minimum of 2 stories. Building width, 22 feet. Building depth, 34 feet. Primary setbacks, front, and this is where we're backing you off a little bit. So you see the commercial stuff, those commercial developments can get closer to the right-of-way. When we start to work on the residential, we're backing it off a little bit to provide a little more green space between the sidewalk and the front of that unit. So for a single-family attached, we're proposing that to be set back at 15 feet. Side yard setback, you have to look at the diagrams on the right, but we might, again, I have to make sure that that zero, the discussion that we had on the attached units applies. So they're all attached, so they don't get that gap, or so you can't create a gap. And the rear setback is a minimum of 25 feet. And then again, we're going to have to think about this, and I'm going to have to adjust this paragraph, which says a minimum of 75% of the primary building, full building width, front elevation shall be placed at the build to line.
Hey, Darren.
Yes.
Hey, other than that 75%, how consistent are the setbacks here with this FS or SFA to outside of the Village Place?
To outside of Village Place? For the single family, Alex,
Family attached, maybe elsewhere in the village?
which zoning, do we have a special zoning district for townhouse? We do, don't we?
You have RMF. You have
RMF is the only
VR,
closest,
you
yeah.
have VMU, all those that are where it's allowed. So it varies based on that, but the typical RMF is a much more stringent,
30-foot?
yeah, it's like, yeah.
That's a
20
front yard setback. So RMF has a 30,
Zero.
0 or 5 feet?
I think it's zero.
Yeah, there's 0. And then the side street setback is going to be 20 feet, where we're proposing, on that? 15 feet. So then you get down to maybe a VMU, and you're sitting with a 0 to 10 foot max. Side yard setback is 0, side street setback is 0. Minimum rear yard is 5. So we don't really have a town, there's
Okay,
a range.
In essence, it's arguably that we're creating a new use here, the SFA.
Yeah.
single, okay.
And we don't, right, we don't have a specific district for townhouses or that style development, right?
I mean, there's some other specific design requirements in the,
For them.
like the VR or other areas like that, and then there's some of the SRs try to lend themselves to talk a little bit about orientation, but don't.
But we just don't have it, we don't have an effective set of design standards for townhouses. So this would almost be our first one if we adopted something like this. Be our first real.
Where is our ability as far as NC codes?
We still have zoning, we have zoning control. So the zoning,
Zoning control, I understand that.
yeah, so,
Yep, setbacks, form, massing, all that, we can. Just
Okay.
the materials and those explicitly listed in 160D 70 something about the materials, the location of doors, garages,
Okay.
sometimes are a little tricky as well.
Now, the only two places in the regulating plan where this appears is the lot across the street here, and also one out, it's really out,
ONN, right?
it's N only.
it's N and O.
N and O, right, that's the only two places in the
That would be-
regulating plan where this
Correct,
form appears,
correct.
which is okay. I think that's always good to keep in mind where in the regulating plan we're talking about. We're not talking about in the core, we're talking about a little bit outside the core.
That is correct. Good points.
Question about the maximum porch encroachment of 2 feet. Just curious where that came from.
We were sitting and talking about that, and we were trying to come up with what we thought was a reasonable standard.
So my question about that, if we have a 75% requirement buildable to the line, is 2 feet feasible bringing steps down off of a porch or whatever the front may be as far as construction standards?
Well, the porch can be behind that. The building just has to be up to the property line, right? So the building itself has to be up to the build to line. The porch, it's a good point. What was that?
You may have to, yeah, you may just, I'm just thinking of the rise and fall of steps. You may have to bump that out maybe another foot or so. There may be somebody in here who's more familiar with construction standards than me, but
It would depend on the grade or the elevation.
yeah.
I'm just trying to think some of the design patterns that you see out in the field. I mean, the other thing that we could say is no encroachment. I mean, we could easily say just there's no encroachment. The porch can encroach into the setback area. That would be an alternative. The porch, we could just say there's no encroachment allowed into the encroachment area, into the setback area. So we just say, no, the porch, it has to be at the build to line, but that would then push everything else back.
That 25% allotment's kind of
All right,
Get a lot of houses without porches.
well, I mean, the intent is with the townhouse is that you have a nice porch that you're sitting on and you're able to, engage with the street and all that.
Hey, Darren, my
Watch the
question,
road go by.
Pardon me?
oh, hey, I'm guessing this is on here somewhere, I'm just not finding it. So, a townhouse development, how close could each townhouse unit be together?
0.
Zero. So, in essence,
Here, a common wall.
share a
Yeah.
common wall for pretty long distance of space.
Along the minimum of 75 feet at least, not for lot depth, minimum building depth is 34 feet. Is there a follow-up on that?
Share the wall, but then the front, the lot width then, in essence, could be, where I'm going is if O gets redeveloped, and considering a development plan comes in with O, there could be townhouses along all of Magnolia, in essence.
Correct,
That may not be a bad thing.
correct. And you can see that development pattern again on this lower right. If that darn tree wasn't in the way, you could see it a little bit easier, but
Required landscaping.
Or tree.
it's a required tree, darn it. Where's Baxter? So you can see how that townhouse, that's your standard, it's a standard 2-story townhouse. That's what it's trying to emulate. In retrospect, I wish I would have had a diagram that showed all 3 units smashed together on the lot, so it'd be a lot easier to understand, what we're trying to promote here.
I'm just trying to take a practical look at what the standards are compared to the 2 areas that they could be located at. too.
Yeah, and the minimum standards are, what we're proposing here. They're not radically different from what we previously discussed. Front yard setback to accessory buildings, again, the accessory buildings have to be completely behind the primary building, and the rear setback is a minimum of 4 feet. So what you can start to see is where the garages on that alley could potentially be developed. And what we don't want to set up is you want to allow for the parking to occur inside the garage, not outside the garage.
And according to our regulating plan, these are a maximum of 2 stories.
That would be
Everywhere.
that would be correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep. Any other questions on this particular style of development? This particular lot? Okay, let's move on to the next one. Now the lots are going to start to get a little bit wider. They're going to get a little bit deeper now. So this is a single-family detached cottage rear-loaded lot. It's just a little bit bigger. It's not an attached. So a single-family detached cottage lot has a small, 22 to 32 foot wide, single-unit residential building that shares no walls with adjacent units. Rear-loaded refers to the positioning of the garage or parking pad, and it's accessed from the rear alley or shared access driveway. So the standards for the SFD cottage lots are as follows, and I'm going down the left column. Lot width, minimum of 34 feet. 42, again, you can see how they're getting wider. 42 mid-block, or 34 for mid-block, 42 for the corner lot, because you need that extra setback at the street. Minimum lot depth is 75 feet. Building height is per the regulating plan. The building width, a minimum of 22 feet. Building depth, a minimum of 34 feet. Just making a note. Primary building setbacks, again, we're pushing it back. Front yard setback is 15 feet. We're still going to have this porch issue that we just talked about. Rear yard of 25 feet. On this one, you could effectively do this. It says a minimum of 75 feet of the primary structure's building, full length of the building, shall be placed at that build to line. So that's 75%. So, the rest could be setback, but a building, 75% of the building has to be at the setback line. I'm looking at anything else. Parking is behind again. So parking will be behind in either a structure or a surface parking area. And I don't see any other thing of note on here. The deck is going to be, let's see. We didn't actually talk about the deck in here, Alex. porch. It's a porch.
Yeah, you got the porch encroachment, the 2-foot porch.
Yeah.
Yeah, we gotta look at a little bit more. What's more reasonable and what are we trying to achieve? Maybe the 2-foot works. I don't know. I'm gonna have to look at some design.
Can you remind me, with porches, are the stairs part of the porch or are they not? I don't remember that from when we were doing that one cottage rebuild for BOA. I don't remember whether the porch included the stairs or not.
Did.
The stairs,
I think it did, and that's why he couldn't do what he.
Sonia's saying yes, Jack's saying no.
Saying the access stairs to the porch, I don't think they were included in the encroachment. Is that right?
Well, we allow an encroachment for so much because stairs are required. There's Alex's 3 feet. Stairs can encroach 3 feet into the.
Okay, so the porch gets 2, the stairs get 3.
But still, that's a 2-foot porch is a pretty
Right.
narrow.
That's sad.
Is it practical? I mean,
And you're requiring it a 15-foot setback, is that right? I think
correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
And then,
15-foot minimum, so you're asking them to, if they want to have a front porch, they got to push it back further. Is that correct?
they need a long skinny lot.
Yeah, and I'm showing this as a build 2 line, so it's saying front yard setback minimum of 15 feet. That should be max.
I'm sorry, say that again. You
should
say
be a
the build 2 line is 15 feet?
Yes, we're showing a build 2 line because it's a cottage style, so these are going to be on smaller lots. So you're trying to get them to align in a fashion kind of similar to a townhouse development. So you create that wall.
Well, the text says primary building setbacks, front setback, 15-foot minimum. Minimum to me means there's
Yes,
more
that's why I'm
allowed.
saying we need to adjust that.
Okay.
It needs to adjust.
So the diagram and the verbiage ought to be consistent.
Yeah, the diagram work, it was a miss. As we were going through this, we've edited this a few times. So that was just a miss. That's,
Question about the parking garages. Does this allow, considering we have some pretty heavy topography, O&O, would this allow under the home parking on the first floor from the rear? We have some homes in our Village Place area today that have that.
you have garages underneath the house?
Well, in essence, a rear entry garage, but let's say that if the topography is such.
Oh, like built into the hill, like
Like a
over there?
basement.
They'd park in under.
Like
the,
not a walkout basement, but a drive-in garage.
Allow for that.
That doesn't preclude that. It wouldn't.
Oh, it does. No, it allows for an integral garage. It does. This image here, this illustration, says integral garage.
All right.
And
So
that,
it would allow for it.
and that garage can be no closer than 15 feet to the main home.
No, that garage, if it's integral, it's part of it, so it's attached. It just has a minimum, that creates a minimum setback to that rear property line or alley of 20 feet.
Well, hold on. I'm looking at the photo top left.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, that there's a 15-foot
Yes.
minimum between the home and the garage.
There is on that for a detached garage, correct?
Okay, that's what I was talking about, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I changed, I changed gears.
All right. Is there an issue with that?
No, I'm just thinking about it.
To have a separation? I think the thing was the ability to create some green space behind the house and before the garage, just to have some usable area behind the house. I think that's why we set up a minimum that way.
And I'm really changing gears here. This question should have come when we were talking about the attached homes.
Uh-huh.
But does this allow for any kind of rooftop structure? No. No rooftop structure, so I can't,
Hold on, define what a rooftop structure
a
is.
deck. Like I'm going to put my barbecue up on my flat roof deck.
No,
Down home.
no, and I
Townhome.
think we're not promoting flat roofs on this. I think there are.
Yeah, so the architectural standards will kind of, which you may recall, we touched.
Because
very
once again,
briefly
I'm
on a
thinking
few-
back to those apartments on Pennsylvania going up to Southern Pines, and I know that they have, there's living space up there.
There is.
It's a deck. And I was just wondering if we were doing that, but you're saying no.
I think we had a discussion on that with flat roofs, and I think that, the desire of, the consensus is that doesn't reflect Pinehurst, standard typical Pinehurst. So historical Pinehurst. So I think we've backed away from that.
Sure, and that's fine. I just didn't see it in this document, but you're saying that's covered in like the PDO. So
That's-
it's
that's
not
covered-
here.
That's covered in those architectural standards that you guys, we tried to talk through. And your eyes glazed over on me on that.
Yeah.
We'll circle back to some of
So
these more
it's
important
just in
ones.
another place. It's
in
not
another
here.
place.
Okay,
Well, we're going to
that's
circle
fine.
back to that.
That's fine.
All right. Anything else on this particular page with the illustrations? Again, you can see what the precedent image is trying to promote. Again, this style development. And we have the maximum porch encroachment of 2 foot. We'll revisit. All right, next page. They get a little bit deeper, or a little bit wider. So this is called a single-family detached manor. Manor, yes, Pinehurst Manor. No, manor rear-loaded lots. A single-family detached manor lot has a 32-foot wide single-unit residential building that shares no walls with the adjacent units. Rear-loaded, see, this is where you can be, this is, again, rear-loaded. We have front-loaded next one, I believe. Rear-loaded refers to the positioning of the garage or parking pad and its access from the rear alley or shared access driveway. So the standards, and here we go, we keep getting a little bit wider. The standards, and again, this is left column, we're going down. The standards for the single-family detached manor lots are as follows. The lot width, the minimum lot width for a mid-block lot is 52 feet. Corner lot is 62 feet. The lot depth is 80 feet. The height is regulated by the regulating plan. The building width is a minimum of 32 feet, and the building depth is a minimum of 34 feet. The primary front yard setbacks are, and we're getting a little bit deeper here, so as you remember, the cottage and the townhouses were at 15 feet. We're showing a front yard setback of 20 feet with these to create a little bit more space. Side yard setback is going to be, the side yards are going to be 10 feet on either side for a mid-block lot, and for a rear-loaded or for a corner lot, it'll be 10 feet on one side and 20-foot street yard setback. The rear yard setback is a minimum of 20 feet. Here we have a minimum of 75% of the primary structure's full building length shall be placed to the build-to line set 15 feet. It should be 20 feet off the front lot line. Accessory buildings to be located completely behind the primary building. See lot diagrams to the right for the side yard setbacks. And then the rear yard setback is minimum of 4 feet. So questions on this? This is getting more into, this is more like probably an R5, some of the R5 lots that we have. It looks very similar to R5. Again, promoting the use of an alley and backloading these things versus loading them right onto the street.
Well, it's more than promoting, it requires, is that correct? I mean, you can't have access to your parking from the front, is that correct?
That's the way it looks. Yeah.
In fact, the only residential building allowed according to this plan so far will be the next the villas, but
Yeah, you're correct.
everything else will be access to the parking for the dwelling must be from the rear in an alley.
And let's think about that practically for Village Place itself. So if we have the 2 lots that we're talking about, those 2 lots, especially the tradition site and the other one, set up very well for they have alleys right now. So they set up very well for that development.
Place right now, going to be very small cars.
They're very,
I was gonna ask, have we really looked at the lot size around here in these areas to figure out whether or not there's egress and, with these little alley situations? Is
the
there
alleys will
enough
be designed,
space?
the alleys will be designed appropriate to be able to handle emergency vehicles coming through them and all that. The alleys that they were built down there, I don't know what standard that they're potentially looking at when those were developed. I don't know how they're getting vehicles through there.
Yeah.
But from an overall development, that's not what we're promoting. We have, I gotta make a note, but I know we have minimum alley widths. is 20 feet at least.
I guess what I'm asking is sort of practically speaking, have we looked at, existing lots in O and N and thought about, can this scheme be plunked down there
I think so.
and fit? Or is everyone, are these lots going to become unbuildable because they cannot possibly fit these specs?
I think it does lay out for that because because you have relatively straight shots along McCaskill, along Cadell, and along Magnolia. You have relatively straight frontage, so you can build. You should be able to carve out lots and build into that. I'm not talking about the drive, the installed facilities right now. I think theoretically you can do that along here. Where you're going to run into that issue is what we've talked about, is Cadell is building off of Cadell. Those are going to be some elevated structures coming off the back. But is it practical? I think, yeah, I think that works in that area. I
want to make a point on top of, along with her point as well, because that was where my mind went. And I don't know, I know this is outside of Village Place, but when we look at the homes along Medlin, Woods, and the lot sizes there, and it's really not that far away. And then we also take a look, road, and those lot sizes do get kind of tight there.
Well, look at
a couple of them do. So my initial thought is congruency. How well do they fit together? I mean, the smallest building envelope that you could have, given these standards, is 1,120 square foot. It's kind of tight. And if we begin to think about if we begin to think, hey, if a development came and that was the smallest lot standard is what was given, built out, would it look correct to the homes across the street, in the rear and the others of the community? And specifically in the area of O, I think there needs to be given some thought to that for the lot sizes there. I'm trying to think of what's in N, but I don't really recall many homes there. And at some point as a developer,
there's single family detached in there.
the incentive may be there also for a developer to build a single family home versus a townhouse. But if I'm the developer and I'm trying to fit what I can on the land, it's townhouse all the way. So those are just some thoughts. 1,120 square feet is kind of it's a tight building.
We can't regulate minimum unit size anymore for 1 and 2 family. So from that perspective, that's why we had long conversations about what should be the land use form in Lot O. And, we settled on, for now, townhouse at 5, 6, 7, and 8. That doesn't mean that, townhouses couldn't come off the table. I think our original plan, our original recommendation was townhouses along Magnolia, backing to single-family detached up along Cadell, and we couldn't figure out how to make that work from a regulatory standpoint. How are we going to place that line? I think the question was, where's that line? Where's that break going to be within that lot? I think we could probably describe it to some extent. So I think we could still do it, but I think we left it at the end to say that these were the acceptable building types in that area, and we haven't circled back to it.
For that particular lot, I think we've essentially said there's 4 different forms of residential which you can choose, and you'll have to come forward and figure out how to fit it on that lot, and which of the 4 or which of the combination of 4 you want to do. But there's a maximum flexibility on that lot, and it's all residential.
Yeah.
In different forms of residential potentially, or maybe all the same. It depends on what makes sense for the builder and the owners.
And I think the one thing, the one give and take on that was currently the zoning, which is VR, would allow multiple family to be constructed in there. Does that allow mixed use as well, or just multiple family?
Right.
I think just residential, so it was.
So I think the mixed, acknowledging that right now you could potentially put an apartment building in there, I think we backed that out of there to give and allowed SFA to be in there to provide maximum ability to.
The only open question relative to that lot and Magnolia is that Does that side of Magnolia require active street frontage?
And I would say if it was if it was commercial, it would require it. But
Correct.
because it's residential, you can't have active frontage
But-
on a residential.
The plan says no commercial. It says only residential in that particular lot. So it seems to me you almost have a half street of active frontage
Yeah, we
rather
can
than
do
a
that.
full
We,
street.
that's an easy adjustment. We just back that active frontage out to half the right of way. We can just pull it off.
The other important item on that one particular lot as well is that we're proposing for the work of this group, those uses based on our discussions where the adopted small area plan doesn't call for the single-family attached.
Right. It does call for residential as an option, though.
Detached, yeah. Mhm.
Detached, yeah.
But that's something else that will have to be broached with council,
Which part?
the traditions
Oh,
side.
the tradition side?
Yes, because the adopted plan does not call for single-family attached.
Oh, you mean the townhouse style development that's there right now? So you got that to deal with. The other thing we have to
All
deal
for
with,
detached, is that what you said?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, I think that's correct, yeah.
I think the other part of that is there's going to be a congruity test because, and that's in the historic district over there, is it not? VR,
Yeah, I think the point there that I believe Jeremy was the one who brought it is that maybe we need to make sure we're not constricting the envelope such that it would maybe potentially create an incongruity with the existing form that's there in that area.
That's what I was going to come back to and just make that point, that was really the basis of my comments there.
And that's an easy analysis we can do we've had some recently developed lots over there. We can pull surveys, we can pull GIS data and see if we're causing something that would be completely out of scale or character, if you will, from what's there.
Darren, to your point, to that give and take a little bit, I think once, and I was trying to pull it up real quick, but once we kind of take a look at the lot sizes along Cadell there, you may find that they fit naturally. I just think at some point, we're going to talk about two different sides of one block being something possibly different that we want.
But there's
is
also
in our
the topography
conversations.
as excavated. I mean, it's not trivial.
yeah, that too, I mean, that is going to be a significant design consideration is that hill going down. I don't,
Well, if we do single family along that hill, there's plenty of builders. I mean, take a left on, my roads are missed. So where you see the homes 5 feet below the road, so builders not going to be deterred by that lot size, but you may end up with a result of something you may not want to, because he's not going to want to bring the money into the lots, into the lot stand, or to bring the lot up to where we want it to be, to road height.
any other concerns on this particular layout? Phil, you good? I'm going to put you on notice tonight because this will be my last time. All right. Next page. Oh, porches, yeah, same porch issues throughout. Just assume porch issues a problem throughout.
And here it is again.
All right. So the next one is we get into our largest lot requirement, and these are the villas. So single-family detached villa front-loaded lots. So this is where now we start to allow for that front-loaded. So you could potentially put these villas up along Cadell, and front-loaded could occur. So the single-family detached villa lot has a single-unit residential building that shares no walls with adjacent units. Front-loaded refers to the positioning of the garage or parking pad and its access from the street in the front of the lot. So the standards for the villa lots, again, they keep getting bigger, they keep getting wider. So the minimum lot width on this one is 72 feet, which is more in line with almost an R10, between an R5 and R10, but closer to R10. So 72 foot for a mid-block, 82 foot for a corner. The lot width itself, the lot depth is 80 feet. The regulating plan will be 1 to 2 stories. The minimum building width is 32, and the minimum building depth is 34 feet. The primary setbacks, we're getting a little bit deeper. The primary building setback is 20 feet. The side yard is going to vary based on, so we got, looks like it's 10 and 10 on either side, unless you are a side street, and the side street's going to be minimum of 20 feet. The rear yard setback, that minimum is 25 feet. And again, here we're saying a minimum of 75% of the primary structure's full building length shall be placed on the build-to line 20 feet off the front line setbacks. Secondary structures, we're saying 6 foot minimum back from the facade of the primary structure. Side yard setbacks, so side yard's the same thing. And rear yard setbacks 25 feet. That doesn't really, we have to look at that. That doesn't really allow for the creation. Say I want to put a shed somewhere on this lot in the back. Those standards really don't allow for any type of shed creation, so we're going to have to circle back to the secondary structure setbacks. What was that? Yes, accessory, I'm sorry. Accessory structure, yes. All right. So, any questions on this particular setup? And we have, there's another standard that we're going to have. So if you look and we'll get away from the minimum porch encroachment, 2 feet or maximum. But on this, when we have a wraparound porch, so there's going to be a requirement. I think that comes in another section of the code. Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, but you would have to, if you got a corner lot and you have a porch, you have to wrap that porch around 2 bays. So length of 2 bays, is it 2 bays?
Or we decided half the width of the porch or something, it's got to wrap around on the corner there.
Yeah, I've seen that quite often, yeah.
So the idea is, yeah, if you got a porch, it's got to wrap around each side of that building.
Not if you have a porch, if you have a corner lot. and a
Corner lot with porch, yes.
Kind of along the same point was made earlier, but all of the frontage lot lines along of Wood Road are at least 112 foot wide and a minimum of 72 in there. I think that's something to consider. I don't think you could fit the house on the bottom right onto a 72-foot width lot. Just something to consider. To my point earlier, I looked at 112 feet. It's the smallest lot width along Wood. I think if you ended up developing this home at 72 or 80 feet, and you went down from 100, 115, 140, I think there'd be a difference in look. I'm sorry, Cadell.
Yeah,
Road.
Cadell, you're right, yeah. And that lot has about 450 to 480, give or take, on Cadell fronting, so.
That's a good point, because I'm looking over here as well. I see a lot of 70s and 75s. Just something to consider.
Okay. We have an extra for, we have an extra for Sonia? All right, so what this does is this takes the standards that we just talked about and it seeks to put it how it would potentially look in our PDO. Because this is how we start to measure things. When somebody comes to us and they're talking about a development and setbacks, we like our tables. So we would seat all of this into our tables. So, you can see we shortened up, if you look at the top of this thing, we have the use types and we shortened it up a little bit. I have some of the single family to RMF to NC, then I got into the commercial uses. The middle, this bold part, the bold part is the village commercial zoning. And I bold this out because the village commercial zoning was kind of that inspiration that we had, because to create the area for the Village Place area. So when you start to look at some of our proposals for the setbacks, things like that, I wanted you to be able to readily see what the village commercial zoning was like and what we're proposing. And then when you get into some of that single-family attached and detached stuff, you know, that R8, the R5, the R10, RMF zoning comes more into play. So you can see some of those differences. So what?
Aaron, one question.
Sure.
We have a minimum lot width at the street line, you know, requirement. Have we looked at all the parcels within this area to see which may or may not be an issue relative to that?
If it's not, no.
I mean, I know we haven't put the streets in the downtown core area, but there are streets, you know, McCaskill and so forth, Rattlesnake. Have we looked at all the parcels to see whether or not they actually have the minimum street width?
I'm going to presume that we do, just based on my recollection of what the lot lines look like. And if they don't, they would become a non-conforming lot.
I mean, they're not big numbers or anything like that.
I don't think we have too many little flag lots that I can think of along Rattlesnake, along McIntyre, Magnolia. I can't think.
Okay, it's just something to keep in mind. What we won't want to, going to Jeremy's point in a way, we don't want to put together a plan that's not implementable relative to the parcel sizes and/or the topography.
No, I think they're small. Topography may be an issue,
Right.
but you don't know until you start getting out there and engineering it. But the lot lines, based on the current configuration, I've looked at it a lot of times. I know a lot of the parcels. I just can't think of any area
Okay.
where we'd run into problems.
So if it is because of, you know, like I get my engineers out there, we're looking at it, and lo and behold, because of the topography and these restrictions, it's not buildable. Then I come back to the village and ask for a variance, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Or I decide that I want to build a single-family detached, and you say, no, you can't, you're allowed to build a single-family detached rear-loaded. In other words, has a 34-foot line, whereas the other one has a 72-foot line.
Yeah.
I mean, are we going to force people into what's available based upon their lot size?
The only place you're going to run into that potential issue is with Block O, right? I don't think anywhere else you're going to run into that issue. Maybe
I'm speculating based upon, I really don't know the answer to all the lot sizes, so.
because
maybe
everything else,
look at them, maybe.
pretty much everything else, maybe some of that stuff along Spur Road, maybe a couple parcels along Power Plant, but I don't even see it there.
Okay.
We're looking at N, Board Branch, is that the road?
Yes.
So two of them are 61.42, one's 85, then the other one hasn't been subdivided yet, but I guess it would depend on what happened. One of those 60 roughly, if that's accurate based on GIS, which is, possible that that's not accurate, but if those are true, then that would basically disallow any villa front, if that were the case, which if somebody wants to build that kind of home, then they wouldn't look there. Is that
Yeah,
how
we
that
may be
would
getting
work?
a little bit far along in the thought process, but
Yeah.
it's still something to keep in the back of our minds that,
Yeah, and I think right now, there's only two spots. N, which David just went over, and you're dealing with a half-filled block there, right? So there's still some room to develop in there. And O, which is wide open pretty much, right? I mean, it's pretty much wide open, so that's where, you have the maximum flexibility once again, and it's one lot right now. So when they start going in there to subdivide it, then we'll get some of these questions, because they'll come to us and we'll say, no, you can't subdivide it because you don't meet the requirements.
an ancillary question, does our moratorium prohibit subdivision of parcels? It does, okay, thank you.
So
Hey, Darren, what was the thought process behind creating the manor and the villa separately, other than trying to give just two different sizes and flexibility there, or was
Yep.
there any other thought process in that?
Yep, two different sizes. The villa allows for the front loading, the other does not allow for front loading, so. And the villa is supposed to be a little bit wider, so it provides you one of our goals was to create a diversity of housing types. and to allow for a diversity of housing types to be created within the area. So you start with the SFA, and you move your way through the cottage, through the manor to the villa. That is a diversity of housing types that can locate in one area. So I think that was the other reasoning behind it.
This is very informative. This is useful. My two questions are, there's little strange symbols
Yeah, I know.
in a couple spots. Under single-family attached, mid-block, rear-loaded, end lot. It's a lot of, easy for you to say. But under minimum rear yard setback, there's a little strange symbol next to the 25. Can you tell me what that is?
Yep, turn the page. Turn the page. Turn the page at the asterisk, and this was
Legends
just,
on the next page, okay.
this is going to get better. It's just a placeholder for now, but that's picking up on, it's a minimum of 75% of the primary structure's front elevation shall be placed at the build to set off line. So that's what that's there for.
Okay.
It actually is,
Turn the page.
Yeah, this paper people, yeah, we have a problem.
it's carrying,
My computer, yeah, I got
it's
it.
carrying through with this. So it's carrying through. All those are carrying through with, with some of the requirements that are found in here.
I got it.
Some of my
Thank you.
figures were wrong earlier as well, as I was squinting to see some of the print. I had 52 and I see a 62 there. So it brings up to about 1,400 square feet,
Yeah.
maybe the minimum, 1,470 or something.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a big difference, really.
Now, one thing that there's a couple of larger adds in here that we don't have in the rest of the code. We have, if you go to the very first row, we have a minimum landscape area. So we don't have that minimum landscape area anywhere else in the code. With the form-based code, with what we're proposing is we're saying that in the Village Place mixed use, we'll have some landscape requirements if there's buffer requirements, but this says you're going to set aside 8% on the site for landscaping purposes.
This is a great tool because, I always think about, hey, after we discuss it here, where does it go and what you do with it? And then, of course, ending up at council level, this gives a lot of information right there at eye level, kind of back and forth, and you can measure.
That's why we like this in table form. And as complicated as this is, we like this too.
Yeah. Do you? You don't like the colors?
Was that the
Each of
royal
those
we?
is a different neighborhood. All right, so minimum lot area or minimum landscape area, we haven't got to that yet. That'll be one of those coming up, 8%. Minimum lot sizes, that's one thing that I think we got to add on to, and so we got to fill that in. So I'll fill that in yet. I haven't done that one yet, so I missed that one. Minimum lot at the setback line. You can see we don't have a minimum lot at the setback line because we have all these build to lines. So we're really picking it up on the build to lines. Mid-block lots, you can see what the difference is. You can read across 24, 24, 34, 22, 28, 34, 34, 72. We don't need to get into all of this stuff. Get down to the minimum building frontage. So this is where we start to, and I think I might have added this row after I had put those asterisks on. So minimum building frontage, you can see we don't have a minimum building frontage in any of our other commercial districts, even in the village center, which could be a concern if a building goes down. So you look at the proposed requirements that we have right here. We're showing minimum 75% coverage on that front setback line. I think there's a couple of notes that we have to adjust one of these things, but that's what we're proposing right now. Minimum front yard setbacks, you can see 10 to 15 to 18. It should be 20. Minimum rears, so there's really, it's a basic it's a basic dimensional requirement table. The only real difference that you're seeing as we get down below is that maximum building height. You can see that it's C regulating plan. So the regulating plan is going to govern the height of the building, whereas you can see in our standard districts, like a VC, it's 50 feet. Like a VMU, it's 50 feet. OP 35. So you can see that there is there's a lot of difference between what's in the current code and what's allowed in the current code and what's being recommended in the regulating plan. That's a significant difference between 50 and 3 stories.
Are we going to take the building heights to any more detail other than 2-story, 3-story? I mean, it's really 1-story, 2-story, 3-story. I mean, are we going to define those stories such as, the ground floor has to be a certain height, and then the building each has to have, each floor has to have 8-foot minimum ceilings or 9-foot ceilings or 10-foot ceilings? I mean, I've seen that quite often. You probably have too.
No, it's in there. Remember, again, when your eyes glazed over because of the architectural standard stuff and how much I threw at you, it's in there.
It's in
So
there?
we'll circle back to it. It's in there, Jack. Even I was having a hard time explaining all that because there was just too much in there. I should have highlighted some other thing. What?
Guessing that you've the calculation from the minimum building widths on each lot kind of came from your calculations of subtracting from the building setbacks and that type of thing, or any.
And you're looking at, what is the standard, maybe minimum size house that you need to have an effective living space? Again, trying to provide that diversity of housing mixed to allow for that.
Just in a world of development where we tend to build as much as we can on as much space as we can, citing on the error of the smallest is what we should expect, possibly the word manor is not really where we are.
But along the Magnolia, I mean, we've talked about, that development pattern along Magnolia.
Yeah.
Could be some type of single family attached. I think it would fit in potentially well along Magnolia, potentially along Cadell. There might be some questions, but
I was just picking up.
I know. I know. All right, so this is really that table. So if you see any issues in the table, we don't need to go through all the numbers because we just did go through all the numbers. And the second page is for the accessory structure setbacks. So, any questions on this? It's coming along. What's going to happen is once we get in general consensus, which we're moving towards general consensus, it all gets put into a form that looks like the PDO. I already have that vision of how that's going to come together. What? Stop it. I do, and you all have that soon too. So.
I have nightmares about it.
Don't conduct any dangerous activity because we can't lose you. You're the only one with that vision right now. Please, we're going to have to put him in a bubble.
No, it works. So, we can circle back to anything. What time is it now?
Got about 8 to 10 minutes left.
Really? Have I used up my 2 hours? Man.
It did.
Already been reminded before the meeting that the last one lasted 35 minutes, so I was well informed of that before.
All right. Well, anybody need to talk about anything else right now? We need to circle back to anything, Jack?
Are we going to look at uses, right?
Well, we're not going to necessarily have anything on the regular meeting agenda, which is next week?
Yeah.
So we could
And
pick
meet.
back up.
Absolutely,
That
absolutely.
next week?
When are we going to,
Philip?
are we going to have street standards too? Because it seems to me that's critical.
Yep.
Critical, okay.
Yep, I don't want to give you too much ahead of time because I know it happens. It's just information
Yeah, no,
overload.
it is a little,
And I want us to get through all these things in a sequence.
spoon feeding us.
Yes. Well, I want you focused hyper on this stuff. And you are. So thank you. This has been very helpful. If anybody sees anything else that they need, just email me. Again, thank Philip for his service. Thank you, Philip.
Years, yeah, thank you.
I was
3
going
years
to mention,
already.
I was going to mention tonight is Philip's last meeting with us. He has decided to not attempt to come back onto the board. I'm one that's very thankful for his time over the last 3 years in Insight, because I know it's been very, very valuable to staff and very valuable to us as a board. So, certainly from me, thank you, and I think that's from everybody. And would you like to say anything? What's your last points of wisdom there, Philip?
I'm leaving on my own volition. Yeah, I've learned a lot from everybody. I've enjoyed it. Just reprioritizing time and family, and I'm stepping off a couple boards actually. So, maybe in the future I'll join another board and be another thorn in the side of the staff.
How many years are you thinking on that?
What's that?
How many years are you thinking, so we can plan that out?
Will you still be here?
Well, I know that I can appreciate certainly spending time with family, and I think a couple of us have, and I know that even staff feels that pulling forward, so it's commendable, and thank you. Anybody else?
Best of luck. Great.
Otherwise, we can adjourn.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Really appreciate it.
Motion to adjourn?
We have a motion by Jack to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by David. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned.